Welcome to another episode of Last Minute Living. If you don't know what we do, let's cue the intro. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you on the other end. G'day guys, welcome back to Last Minute Living. You've seen a couple episodes now with Jag the Joker. It was a good time down there. We've got an episode coming out on his channel. As soon as I know about it, I'll let you guys know on the social media. He had a bit of a problem with his laptop deciding to basically blow up, so that's game over for that, but I believe he's working hard to get that one out on his channel, so we'll touch on that very soon. But until then, I've got my car unpacked, done a bit of cleaning, but I thought I would touch on sort of different aspects of my setup as as the weeks go on. Not consistently, we'll be back on the trip soon, so don't worry about that. But this week we want to talk about power. So as most of you guys probably know, I'm rolling with the Engel battery box. Now, I've been using it for probably about 2 years now. So we're going to sort of dive in a little bit to why I'm using it, pros, cons. If I get a new car, will I be using it again? Will I sell this off and move it on? Go for a different setup next time? We don't know, but we will basically be running through what I think so far of that. But like I said, 2 years been using it, hasn't skipped a beat, which is super handy. But I'm just going to fill you in with a few little details that might help you make the decision as to whether you want to go a battery box or your general conventional 12 volt setup in your car. So let's crack on and dive into the features on this Engel battery box. So first things we want to touch on is the display. Now if we look here, we have a battery isolator, which is super handy for keeping the charge in your batteries. You have a display screen which shows things like load and current going into your battery, which is also handy. A few little controls to use that screen. We have a regular 12 volt cigarette plug, I suppose, 12 volt port, whatever you want to call it. And this one here is actually a bit of a game changer for me. It is called the Engel PosiFit. So if you look inside, it is actually not a standard 12 volt socket, but it has an Engel PosiFit, which I'll talk about a bit now. Alright, so Engel PosiFit cables. For those of you that have Engels, awesome. It's going to go real well. This is my Engel port from my old Engel that I've usually got in my car. Currently in the shed, but we'll put it back in soon. Basically, it's got a 2-prong little gap down the bottom that slides in, but it actually screws in. So when you buy your Engels, they come with a screw on top, which will have your regular 12 volt, but if you actually unscrew that, you end up with an Engel PosiFit. Now, when I was using my big 80 litre Waco, I found that the 12 volt socket would often wiggle itself out as I'm driving along, things in the back of the car, all that kind of stuff. So I decided to actually change out to an Engel port on my Waco fridge. So it's pretty simple. It's DC, so you've got a positive and a negative. You can do it yourself. A little bit of solder and a little bit of electrical tape will sort that out. Obviously you'll need to buy a cable. I'm not sure if you can get the fittings. We just bought the cable and chopped it, put it together. But this is my genuine Engel one. and that goes in there perfectly. But what it also does for me is frees up that 12 volt port. So super handy, keeps it locked in so your fridge isn't going to turn off on your travel over. So super handy to think about. But there is also a couple of other options that you can use for those who like using Anderson plugs. So speaking of Anderson plugs, this is an Anderson in and also an Anderson out. So some people, being 12 volt, like to swap out their positive and negatives for an Anderson cable. Definitely you can use it. However, I don't prefer it with this setup just because there is only one and it gets a little bit mixed up. I use this Anderson as my main input for charging this while I'm on the road, so that's why I don't use it. If you're going to be using a lot of Anderson plugs, maybe this is probably not the setup for you. For me, it works perfectly fine. Alright, now if we jump into the back of my ute, I have a Anderson plug running from my starter battery all the way to the back of my tray. Runs 50 amp cable, so you can get pretty much maximum charge through this battery box. Now it does have a DCDC charger built in. It also has smart charge technology, which allows you to basically continually put current into that box and it will basically float the charge at 100%, so it will never overcharge your battery, and then as it drops it'll just top it up. So it sort of works like a trickle charge. So while we're talking about charging, we're going to touch on sort of what comes in the box. So obviously you'll get your battery box. The only two leads that you get are a 12 volt charger cable. Now this plugs in to the side of the battery box. I'll throw that up on screen now so you should see it's got a strange little connection, but this cable will charge probably mainly for the people that are maybe running a small fridge, don't need that much charge going into their battery box to keep it going. I used it at the start, but it does not put anywhere near the amount of power as an Anderson will, hence I've opted for a little bit of a setup change. The second cable you're going to get is a 240. Again, same port, goes into the side. I usually use this when I disappear, or if I've got a trip coming up, I can put everything in the car. I can run this out the canopy window, plug it in, and like I said, it'll trickle in and keep it at 100%. So when I'm ready to go, unplug it, throw it in. Super handy for people that go to powered caravan sites. Perfect. Get this out, plug it into your battery. You don't have to rearrange any of your gear, and just let it do its thing overnight. Charging it, no worries, because again, it's not overcharging the battery. But there are technically three different ways that you can charge. Also through the Anderson, which I might run through now. I've got a little bit of a splitter set up, which allows me to then plug in my solar when I'm parked up and I need a bit of power. Car's turned off, solar blanket comes out. So I've got a little bit of a setup just to make it a little bit easier for me. So let's run through that now. So out of a little bit of scrap wood, I built myself a little wall that sits flush up just to line up with the wheel arch there. Basically, you do need to run your solar controllers. I could be wrong, but from what I've found online, you need the solar controller to then run into the battery box. So this only has a smart charger. It doesn't regulate your solar input. So we have a nice, I'm pretty sure it's a 50 amp, no, it's a 20 amp fuse. So there you go, 20 amp fuse on the solar converter. This is my Ridge Rider, which came with my blanket, which you might have seen. And that just runs, that's the solar input, which runs to an extension lead, which I use to plug in. Now, the output of that solar controller runs into a double splitter. This end of the double splitter runs into my car. They're never really used at the same time. Keep that in mind. I don't know whether or not the battery box would handle that much power, but like I said, it's got a smart charger, so it would regulate that to some extent. And then that just runs into an extension lead, which I run directly into the battery box behind. And like I said, I mounted it on this little bit of wood, which just helps me keep it all a little bit more organized. So nothing too crazy, but yeah, that's what we're looking at. Alright, so we're going to touch a little bit on the elephant in the room. Probably be this astronomically large power board that I have double-sided tape to the top of the battery box. Now, this comes with a 300 watt inverter. It's really not good for anything other than charging phones. For me, works great for cameras. It just allows me to run some basic stuff off 12 volt. The reason I've got the power board on top, it's got 4 USB ports, which is super handy for charging my phone or batteries, drones, things like that. And it's just a little bit of easy access to the top. You can keep a few things plugged in, switch them on and off as you go. But it also comes with a 5 volt USB port on the actual inverter itself. So that's pretty handy if you're just using it like, you know, small amounts. It's really great. You don't need to go sort of put a power pack on top, but hey, it works for me, so that's what I've done. Probably another bit that we need to mention before we kick into just starting it up and giving it a bit of a demo. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to flick the hood, I suppose, and we'll talk about the battery that I've got inside. Underneath, you'll see we've got a heap of 10 amps there for your 12 volts and your mains, but also a 30 amp for your 300 watt inverter. Now the battery I'm running in here is a 100 amp lithium. I believe these take up to 120, could possibly get 130. However, your biggest limitation when it comes to batteries is the size. I'll throw the sizes up on the screen now. So if you're looking for a battery, they're the dimensions that you want to be rolling with. It does do AGM and a few other different deep cycle and lead acid, I believe. It tells you on the setup when you connect the new battery what battery you're using, which allows it to regulate properly how much current it's putting in. I got this on a recommendation from good old Jimmy down at Salty Fishos. He has the original version of this, and he said, hey, why don't you get this? So I thought, why not? Let's give it a try. Main reason I did was because it's portable. So not only this doesn't have to be in my car at all times, which can be handy for people with a tent setup, something like that. Caravans usually have built-in batteries, but maybe something like a camper. For me, it works great because it can also just be left in my car. So it's sort of the best of both worlds. So nothing really there that's limiting me, other than maybe an inverter. But again, if that's in your needs, you might just be running a fridge. So something like this, super easy. Everything's together. There's no wiring. You throw a battery in, you connect it up, and you're good to go. So super easy, super simple. It's got everything you need. You can run a fridge, you can run some lights off it if you want to be simple. For those that want, you know, to run certain things with a inverter, look, probably not the best option, because at the end of the day, you don't really want to start modifying this or, you know, going Anderson out and start doing some other bits and pieces. So keep it simple. If you want to keep it simple, perfect option to go for. So now if we start it up, we're going to take the isolator the isolator off. There is a red light here that shows the circuit is live, just on the inside of the Engel posi fit. And you've got to hold this button, which then opens up your little display window. As you can see, I've got 76% charge. That works it out based on the voltage. Now I can push these buttons. It is a bit slow. It doesn't have I suppose a really fast processor, but there's a way. So see, you go there, I've changed that now, and 13.1 volts is what's coming through. That's giving the 76% charge. So that's super cool, you know, it works. I prefer to leave it on the watts setup, which is what we had here, but like I said, it is slow. So this will show currently 0 watts, meaning nothing going in, nothing coming out. But if I just take a second and plug it in, you'll see we're getting some charge. As you can see now, we're starting to get a positive flow on the battery. It also shows how many hours left to a full charge, which can be super handy when charging your battery. Now the 240 volt roughly fluctuates between 80 and 90 watts. That's how much charge it puts in. However, when connected with Anderson, you're getting about 150 watts and maybe even more. All in all, just something to remember when you are charging or discharging the battery. So basically, if you're drawing current or putting current in, you need to make sure this isolator is on. If you turn it off, it does not charge a battery. However, I found out, I suppose through a little trial and error, I turned off the battery isolator, still had my fridge plugged in. I was a bit confused why the fridge was cold. So basically what happens is when that isolator is turned off, it basically bypassed straight through my Anderson plug straight to my fridge. So that's probably not a bad thing, but again, it's got that smart charge, so you might as well just leave it running if you've got things in your fridge. Basically, I suppose we're going to sum it up. Would I use it again? Look, I think the portability probably sold it a little bit more at the time than it has now. I probably don't really utilize its portability that often. For me, I'm usually parked next to my car. I'm usually, for example, if I want to charge my phone, I can just run an extension cord straight out of the battery box. Look, the power situation with the inverter, I probably don't need it. I mean, you can get little cigarette sockets that can plug in, that you can put USB, to charge things like phones and cameras and whatnot. In terms of build quality, ease of use, awesome. That's wicked. Like I said, probably your biggest limitation is just your battery. So, I mean, 100 amp hour for me can run a full 80 litre for, I think in Coral Bay, I ran it for about 5 days and didn't even use half the battery. So, there's a lot of factors obviously that come into that, but that's probably your biggest limitation is your battery size. So if you need something bigger than 100 amps, if you're running, big fridge, you're using it often, putting new stuff in, taking it out, you're probably not going to use this kind of setup. But for someone that's, weekenders, running a small fridge every now and then, not really a big deal, a lot less clutter, it's all contained, which is super handy. A lot less maintenance as well, you're not having to worry too much about cables, coming undone or unsoldering, if you've got a panel or something like that. So super awesome, as you can tell by the scratches all over this box. It's been put through its paces, it's done well. Like I said, I run the Anderson in for my main power, and I'm not doing anything too big, but it runs a fridge and it can run some 12 volt lights off it quite easily. So if you want something simple like that, this Engel battery box is definitely going to be the way to go. I've not had any dramas with it, so if you are sort of debating, should you get something like that, should you wire your own one in, I'd first go for your battery. I found it a bit hard finding the battery. There's only a few 100 amp hour lithiums that actually do fit it, but if you need anything bigger, you're really going to come unstuck there. Running things like, I don't know, some people take air fryers, things like that. You're going to need a way bigger inverter as it is, so you're pretty much going to come unstuck there. So I think your two main points, whether or not you should get an Engel battery box, is going to be, your battery consumption, and two, how many things are you going to be running off it, simple setup or not. But other than that, it's been a great product. Just thought I'd run through a little bit of how I use it, the ins and outs, hopefully help someone out there that's deciding whether to do a 12 volt system or go for a portable system. But until then, we'll see us on the next episode. Hopefully we'll be exploring somewhere if this weather clears up a little bit. So until then, I'm off to work. We'll catch you on the next episode, guys. Thanks for tuning in.